So, through learning some of this tribal history through my father and some other elders that I've spoken to, I find out that the first treaty we made with the United States was in 1806 along Lawyers Creek, just above Cami, Idaho, along Lawyers Creek, what became known as Lawyers Creek. That was the first verbal agreement we had with Lewis and Clark, who were representatives of the United States, who were actually on a military expedition counting Indians from St. Louis west. And of course, we were counted as well. They estimated that Nez Perce amounted to between 6,000 and 7,000. And that was in 1805. By 1900, our numbers were only 1,300 Nez Perce. But even prior to Lewis and Clark, we had also suffered at least 2 epidemics that wiped out whole villages along the Salmon and the Snake and the Clearwater. We lost thousands of our tribal people to diseases. So at the time of the war, we were somewhere between 5 and 1,300. Now, we agreed with Lewis and Clark that yes, we will be peaceful and friendly as long as you treat us the same way. That was the agreement we made. Well, we adhered to that agreement up until 1877. The first Nez Perce was killed in 1813 at the mouth of Palouse River by a trader, ironically named Clark, from Canada. It was just an argument over a silver goblet at the mouth of Palouse River. So the argument was over who took the goblet. And nobody would fess up to it from the tribal people. So they chose one Nez Perce and hung him. They put a tripod up and hung him. That was the first killing of a Nez Perce after we would agreed with Lewis and Clark that we would be peaceful and friendly. We didn't go to war at that time. This was in 1813.
They would encamp there on the Colville. The main living area during the winter, summertime was up in the area of Nez Perce. In the wintertime, they duplicated what they used to do here. They'd go from the upper reaches of the valley down to the lower reaches where it's protected, near the creek or rivers down below. So what they used to do is leave from Nez Perce, go all the way down to the Columbia. And there's a spot, we can pick it out, where they set up the encampment for winter. And that became their winter home. During that time, the government provided materials so they could build homes. There was a mill built in the town of Nez Perce. So the houses were built. The chieftain had one house, but he never lived in it. He stayed in his camp. Some of them thought, oh, he's just staying a blanket Indian, here for the new, more modern way. No, amongst us, even in our birth, when we came around and came into the family, we would hear the notion, we're going to go home. Someday, we're going to go home. And I remember thinking, but we're going to go home. When we leave here, we're going to go back to Nez Perce. You guys are home, so where's home? long where somebody told us later what he was talking about was Wallowa country. He says, we're not going to go home again. This is where we are. So when I hear the phrase, welcome you home, I kind of, yeah, right. We come down and dance for you, then we're going to go home. I agree with the sympathy and the empathy. But the reality is, we don't live here. But this is where our ancestors lived.
But one of the things I shared at a meeting that I'd like to share right now, Albert had shared that our Chupp, they never drove a car. They didn't own a car. So what Chupp would do is get on a bus. I'd go with her. We'd go stay in Umatilla in Pendleton to visit our relatives. We'd visit for a week, then we'd get back on a bus and go back home. One of the things that happened is when we'd get there, we'd go into the home, and my aunts or whoever greeted us, they would go up to my Chupp and they'd start weeping. They would cry. And I never understood why they did that. Then she would go down to Lapway, get on the bus, go to Lapway. We'd stay there for a week. But the same thing would happen. We'd get there, go in the home. Her niece, Annie, would come up to her and they'd start weeping. And I often wondered why they were crying. Later on, our mother shared with us, it's because we're all separated as a people. We're all split apart. We can't see each other every day. And so when you go visit them, it's because they miss each other. They miss each other dearly. And so because of this, sometimes you have that anger. And why? Why did this happen to our people? But you could hear it in the winds, and I don't know if you're ever familiar with that feeling. But I could feel it up there in the hills and the mountains. And it made me feel that way. And I wanted to cry, but I know that, in our teachings. So I had my nephew sing. But just being here on this land and seeing, because my first thought was our people, how they had to walk in those valleys, walk through treacherous places to get away. Then I think about the winter months and the things that they had gone through. And without knowing and what I would say today, that's what I wanted to share. It was probably a lot of the heart feelings about our people.